Heavenly Father, we want to thank you for blessing us with life today. Lord, we know you chose every one of us because you designated us a particular role for us to play. We hope that we followed in your footsteps. We hope that we heard your voice. We hope to hear your voice again this evening as we meet together. Help us with our spiritual eyes so that we see what it is that you see and what you need us to see as we move forward in our discussions as elders in the church, Lord God. I ask you to continue to bless every elder and each of our pastors with health, with good health, Lord God, and for strong prayer. This evening, I offer this up to you. In your son, Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
All right. Thank you, Anthony. So we're going to be looking at some data for just a minute, and we will be recording tonight so that we can send this out to our church. They have appreciated the transparency with which we have made these decisions. And for those of you from Christ Church who are watching this after the fact, let me just acknowledge what we all know, and that is that there are at least two different kinds of people who will hear this discussion and this decision. One are those of you who think that we should have already returned and that we should already be back. And on behalf of the elders and Keith and me, I want to thank you for your patience and your continued patience, and ask that you trust that we're trying to make the wisest decision, even though it may be more careful for you. And there's another group who wouldn't come back if we were live right now and you think it's too soon, and regardless of when we come back, you will likely think that that is too soon. And we just want you to hear our hearts on this, to know that when we come back, if that's too soon for you, we respect that and want you to continue to feel comfortable in worshiping from your home and online. And we will support you completely as you do that. Guys, I'm going to share some of the same data points that we've looked at in the past. And none of this really will be new, but, well, there will be some new. And just to run through quickly the reasons to return. Number one, it's what we do. And fellowship and us getting together and worshiping in community is an important part of the Christian experience. Number two, we live in faith, not fear. And so we don't make decisions based on fear. We always make them based on faith. Number three, there's an element of Christian liberty. And people who want to return should be able to, and people who don't want to should be free to worship from home. Number four, we're not here for the strong, but for the weak. And if there are those that are spiritually struggling, we want to be there for them. We want to be able to support them in the best way that we can as a family of faith. And then, as we've talked about before, Christians have always taken risks. And there are certain countries in the world today where the fact that they were to get together and worship puts them at immediate risk. And yet Christians throughout history have taken that risk, and it's just a part of the Christian experience. And there are reasons why we would not return to live worship. There remains still a risk of exposure to the COVID virus. And we all know that those risks increase in large crowds. So I watched the PGA Championship yesterday, and they played the game, but there weren't any fans there. And certainly we're looking at college football, looking at potentially canceling parts of their season. The NFL is looking to come back and play, but with limited or no fans in the stands. And that's because when we get together in large crowds, we increase that risk. There is a higher risk in Irving than there are in other parts of the state of Texas and even the Metroplex. us returning does put volunteers at risk. And so it takes a level of volunteers to allow us to worship together in a high number. And so when we ask those volunteers to come, that's something that we need to ask them to do with a level of knowing that we're asking them to take that risk. There still doesn't appear to be a significant outcry for us to have already returned or even to return in the next few weeks. And unless, I mean, we haven't taken a new survey, but anecdotally, we've talked to enough people throughout our church to know if that were increasing, we would know that. Last time we talked about why we wouldn't have a limited number, and these reasons are still just as valid as they were then. And yet, as we look at the numbers are going in the right direction. So we've met in April, May, June, July, and now tonight. And it's good to see that these numbers over the last couple of weeks have significantly decreased from where they were at a July high. And if you were to listen to people talk about why that is, it's because as a society, we're doing better working together to wear masks when we're outside the home, to recognize the need for social distancing. When they closed bars and other places where people gathered in close proximity, that helped. And all of these things it's what they said, that if we all do these things and you put them all together, then there's a higher capability of lowering. We looked in July at Irving zip codes, and in July it looked like this, and now in August you can see that these numbers have started to come down. And so it's true in each of the zip codes that every zip code has decreased from where it was in the high of July, just as Dallas County has decreased. When we look at where we are, this is July, and 75061 moved, thankfully, out of the orange and into the pink. And this is the same numbers as of last week or as of Friday. And we remain in the pink, which is still at risk, but certainly not where it was when it was in the orange. So that's good news as well. We're at least moving in the right direction. When we looked at specific hotspots, this was July, and now as of Friday, that's looking better in the Irving area. And yet you have to recognize that we still, this area right around here is still where our church is located. That's different from where some of our members live up here or in other parts of Dallas where they're seeing very few cases compared to North Irving, Coppell, parts of Carrollton, Richardson. We still are in at least some level of risk. And so we recognize that. One of the good signs is that if you look at UT Southwestern recognized that dotted line there at the bottom that says 1 is an important line. And the epidemic grows and persists above that line, and it declines below that line. And this was July's number, which was significantly above and trending the wrong way. This is the August number, which is significantly below and trending the right way. And that's certainly been borne out in the numbers that we've seen decline in Dallas County, which is significantly good news. And I'm not going to give a commentary necessarily to the next few weeks, but over the next month, we're going to see kids return back to school. When they do, we're going to see more and more businesses that open up or parents that are now free to go back to work. And when they do, we hope that these numbers will stay the same. And as our society still works together to wear the masks and to wash our hands and avoid or at least practice social distancing, hopefully we'll see these numbers continue. when you look at Christ Church, this is a new piece of data that I put together today. These are year-over-year attendance by weeks from the middle of March through the end of July. And it goes back and it looks at every week from 2013 through 2020. And so you can see the growth from the Navy, from the royal blue that is 2013, up to the navy blue that's 2019, and then this crimson red is 2020. Now, let me say a word about this, okay? Because as you know, or if you don't, as I want to clearly state, we don't have any earthly idea how many people watch our service on a Sunday. We have no clue about that. And so what I'm not saying is that this is the number of people who are watching on Sunday. I don't know that, and nobody does. What I did was I took the number of units that had viewed our services on a Sunday, and I just plugged those in every week during this. Okay, now here's where it gets interesting. That number was actually almost twice. Well, that number was exactly twice of this number right here, okay? Every week we've had somewhere between 900 and 1,400 different units that have watched all or part of our Sunday morning service. It was way up here. And I thought, okay, I know that our church hasn't doubled this year, right? Everybody would know that. So what I did is all I simply did was take that number and divide it in two, and it gave me this number that you see in the crimson red. And what I realized is that while this still is not an accurate picture of the number of people, it's so closely correlated with all these others that because of the close correlation, I think it is statistically significant. There's no other way to explain how you put a number in, seemingly a random number, and make one set of math to it and get such a close correlation over the same kind of months. So I think that, again, it's anecdotally, it's not scientific, but I don't think we're seeing a drop-off in our regular attenders, even on our online service. You see the correlation that was there in Easter. You see it on the 4th of July, which would be right in here. And you see it for every week from the middle of March through the end of July. So again, it's best guess, but that's the best we can do when we can't physically count heads. We looked at what a return would look like. And where we started, frankly, was we went to the state of Texas, and the Attorney General's office gave fairly specific instruction for houses of worship. And so it's a 5-page document that I didn't put in here, but these are the main points. Instruct sick employees, volunteers, and guests to stay at home. Practice social distancing. Maintain good hygiene. Implement environmental cleanliness. Clean and disinfect the work areas frequently. All right? And then it goes on, when conducting services, houses of worship may consider implementing the following practices. Encourage all attendees who are 65 and above to stay home and watch services online, or provide a senior service exclusively for attendees 65 and above to attend in person. Again, that's not our rule. This is the state of Texas. Ask all attendees who have an underlying at-risk health condition to stay home. Equip ushers and greeters with gloves and masks. Consider keeping childcare closed until we can comply with the CDC guidelines for child care facilities, which are really onerous, by the way. To ensure all attendees sanitize their hand and put on masks. To ensure that attendees sit with their family units and then maintain 6 feet between the next family unit. And that has some implications with the number of people who can attend. That we should dismiss families by family unit so that as people leave, they can leave in an orderly kind of way and not stand around and congregate. We should sanitize the seats. We should refrain from passing collection plates, and we should consider how we do communion. Now, those are the primary state of Texas recommendations. It did have a look at-risk individuals, and so I went ahead and included those. 65 years and older, they live in a nursing home, they have an underlying medical condition like a lung disease or asthma or COPD, a heart condition or hypertension. They're immunocompromised, so they've cancer treatment, or they smoke, or they've got bone marrow or organ transplants, and you can see the rest. They are obese, or they have diabetes, or they have chronic kidney disease, or they have liver disease. So all of those should choose to stay at home. So with that in mind, we started looking at what it would look like if we were to come back, for instance, in September. And this would be true, by the way, if we choose to come back in October or November. For the first 4 Sundays, so the first month, we would worship, and we would have live music and teaching, likely with some kind of at-home presence, so that we're trying to identify with both those who are there live and those who are at home. We have a max seating of 125 people. Now, that's 200 chairs based on rows that are 6 feet apart. But because each family member has to seat 6 feet from each other, depending on the size of the family, we anticipate about 125 or so people in one service. We would consider having 3 services, a 9 o'clock and 11 o'clock, and then a 1 o'clock service for people who are 65 and older. And that way we don't provide childcare during that service, and we do provide that for those who are at risk. We would have to have sign-ups for each service, up to 125 people. That way we know when people are coming, and the first 125 at 11 can come at 11. Others would come at 9. And then when we have 250 people, or if we have the 1 o'clock service, when we have 375 people, we would ask everybody else to stay at home. We would ask everybody to wear masks inside the building at all times. That's while they worship, while they sing, while they do everything inside the building. We would consider offering preschool, nursery through pre-K. The reason to do that is because we can spread those kids out over all the rooms that we have, and we would have a max of 4 children per room, and that's contingent on us having enough volunteers under the age of 65 to be able to facilitate that. And so that number is our best guess. We would likely offer middle school at 9 o'clock and high school at 11 o'clock, and they would wear masks. We would hand out prepackaged communion packs to everyone as they enter the auditorium. We would screen with both questions and taking temperatures all volunteers and all children before they enter the classroom. And then we would add 1st through 6th grade after 4 weeks, and when we can adequately follow the CDC guidelines. Here would be the safety protocols. We would deny entry and or activity for anyone who has 100 degree temperature or above. We would ask everybody to leave the building after 30 minutes after the service so that we could clean and fog and disinfect. Everyone in the building would wear a mask 100% of the time they are in the building, with the exception of speakers and singers as they are speaking and singing from the stage. We already have the hand sanitizers and the foggers. We would ask there to be no non-family physical contact, handshakes, hugs, that kind of thing. We would communicate with the entire church if anyone who has attended tests positive. So let's say that that the lovely is teaching a 3-year-old class, and on the Tuesday after church she tests positive. We would send out an email to everybody in the church that says a teacher in the 3rd grade classroom tested positive for COVID. She taught at 9:30. She attended worship at 11. And that way everybody could see, everybody could make decisions based on that. And then anyone who tests positive would be asked to remain at home for at least 7 days after their last negative test, or 14 days after the last day of symptoms. And that's just I don't know what people are doing these days. So that's the data, and that's the plan, though the plan, you know, is predicated on whenever it happens and subject to refinement. We know that school's going to start. A lot of our children's ministry will, I was talking to Megan today, a lot of our children's ministry, for instance, will follow the experience that the kids are having at the school. So we think it's easier when the kids go to school and they've been wearing a mask for a week or 2 or 3 at school, for us to then ask them to continue to wear a mask at the church building. And whatever the schools choose to do over time is what we will follow as a church procedure as well, letting the schools take the lead on that. Other than that, I don't think look, it's just like every other week. There's not a right or wrong decision. It's not right to say, okay, based on these numbers, it's clear that we ought to start on September the 13th. And based on these numbers, you could make that decision too. And I know you guys have been praying for wisdom, so I'm just going to open it up for thought and conversation and thought.
Hey, Greg, question. Would the children's classes be at both 9 and 11, or just one or the other?
Good question, Scott. That's wholly contingent on the volunteers. Here's the challenge that we have. Most of our volunteers are 65 and above. And so what we have to do is, and we don't want to strong arm anyone who's uncomfortable with being in a classroom either, right? So what we'd have to do is get a list of all volunteers below the age of 65, and then ask them how many of them would be willing to teach. And if that number is 10, great, we're going to have a huge nursery and 2-year-old class spread out. If that number is 30, we can have 4, 5, 6 classes. But again, based on the number of kids and then the number of teachers trying to keep the number at 4 or less in every classroom, it's just a math game that I can't answer today, other than to say, in theory, it's the way we would work that out.
If the numbers worked out, would we just offer it at 1?
No, if the numbers worked out, we would offer at 9 and 11, starting, for instance, with nursery and 2-year-olds. And then if that goes good, or we have enough, we might do nursery through kindergarten. The reason why we would start younger instead of older is because the younger the child, the less susceptible they are to COVID. And therefore, that's just a part of the CD. We actually thought it would be opposite. We thought, let's start at the oldest age because they're the easiest ones to say, wear your masks. And yet the CDC has said that the younger, the better in daycare and that kind of thing.
You know, Suzanne and I, we kind of watch what we're doing, but we pretty much do anything we think we want to do anyway. To me, I'm in favor of maybe setting up for the first Sunday in October and seeing what we get. And that still gives us time to look at numbers if they change over the time. But that's just kind of the way I feel. We're out and about doing things, and I think most of us are. You know, we're just all kind of careful, and that's kind of what we need to be at church. So, you know, to me, somewhere around the 1st of October, and let's see what we get. But that's just kind of the way, my opinion.
My thoughts on this are the schools, I think, are going to be a real good barometer for us to look at. There's a lot of schools that are opening not virtually, but in person this week. They're not in Irving, obviously, but that's coming shortly. And I think it's going to be a real good barometer to see what happens with students, what happens with faculty, what happens with administration, what decisions they make or don't make. And I'm along the same line as what Lloyd just said. Let's look at October, see if these numbers continue to decline, especially in Irving, because I think that's a great trend that we're seeing. But let's utilize, my vote would be to utilize that information in schools and see what happens. We ought to know pretty well by the middle of September what the schools have found out, whether we're peaking again or continue a downward trend.
What's the Irving Schools plan? They home until September 9th, or I'm just not aware of what their schedule is.
Yeah, I asked Megan to join us for some of this, and we're going to talk about the children's thing next. Megan, do you know the answer to the Irving Schools?
Yes, they are staying online. They start August 7th. They're online through Labor Day, and they hope to be able to go in person starting September 8th. But they also they gave the parents an option. They can go back in person or they can do remote learning. So they'll have both going.
If I could just add to that, I did ask a question when they did their polls to see who would take which route. You know, there's 3 routes they can do when they do go back. They'll be able to either choose 100% there at school, 100% online, or they can decide a hybrid where they're at school 2 days a week and the rest virtual. And I was surprised to hear that 40% of the people chose to be at school, 40% chose to go 100% virtual, and only 20% decided to do a hybrid. Now, while those numbers are different than us, we're showing only 10% wanting to go back. I think we can still use those numbers as a barometer to see what actually takes place. There's still a lot of kids going back to school at 40%. That gives them the space they need, obviously. So I think we can still use those numbers, but I was shocked at the splits there. I thought there would be more doing hybrid than there really were. And I think it has a lot, obviously, to do with parents need to get their kids back at school so they can go back to work and stay at work. But that was a pretty astounding number. Okay, well, I'll continue. One of the things I noticed is that there are still quite a few number of churches that are still online. As I've been traveling quite a bit. I've been looking at churches, and the majority are still online. They're not even in the Irving area, obviously, but I think they too are like us, looking at what's actually taking place, what are the numbers in their area, but also what are people thinking as far as the congregation. I know we talked about this last time about, are we okay with being online right now? And I think we're doing a phenomenal job being online. I can definitely feel a rise in the spirit in the church, even online. So I like it that we're not trying to rush to get back. I was actually watching, happened to be passing through and saw the Potter's House, one of the Potter's House sermons today, and T.D. Jakes was preaching to an empty audience, an empty sanctuary, and that's a pretty big sanctuary. And I read online what they're doing, and they too are waiting to see if it's going to be safe, because they know that their congregation would rather not be there, but be able to worship from the home just like they are now, just to stay safe. But I think when we do go back, I like the plan that we have in place. The one thing that really catches my attention is which we all have to definitely expect, and that is that we communicate with the entire church. If someone does test positive, just like companies are doing. I work at companies every day, and there's not a company that's not touched by this. And every time they have someone that tests positive, it changes the entire atmosphere of that company. There's like whole departments that have to stay home. So I just imagine what it would look like if we did have someone in church that tests positive. How would that affect us? If we did have to say, well, in the 11 o'clock service, someone did test positive. How would we respond, or how would the congregation respond? I like the idea of waiting until October for that very reason. I hate to see something happen. My wife's company, for one, Dr. Pepper, they keep getting pushback because of that very thing. Every month they're pushing back another month. Well, last week they pushed back to the first of the year, and they just got an email today saying, because of what's taking place in their company, that they're not being pushed back till June of next year. So it just kind of gives an outlook of kind of what people are thinking when they do have outbreaks. So I'd just be curious to see what, how we respond, or how our church responds, the congregation responds if someone does come up positive, because we do have cases obviously in our church.
I talked to a couple of church guys this week or today. Both of them said that they're running attendance at around 20%. Now, there are some churches that have returned where their attendance is significantly higher than that. But by and large, that's about the average, that whatever number they think they have, about 20% of them are actually attending once they go back live.
I'll chime in now. I think numbers are encouraging. I've been following them myself, as we go along, and they're encouraging. I think that I agree with Richard in that I think we should see what schools are doing in September. See what's going on there. I would anticipate another spike as schools start up. That would be my guess. I don't know for sure, but let's use September as if numbers continue to go down, if numbers continue to look good, I'm fine with setting a date in October with the idea that it's a tentative date. If numbers start looking bad again, that may be pushed off. If numbers trend in the right way, then but like Greg just said, I would not anticipate a huge amount of people right away. I think people are going to be, you're going to have some people who think that we should have come back already, and that's fine. But some of us will not come back right away because of family health concerns and things like that. And I would not anticipate a big group. Certainly less than 50% would be my guess. And Greg put a 20% on there from some people. That wouldn't shock me. But I would say, set a tentative date if we want to use the 4th of October. I think that's the first Sunday in October. I think there's I think it's good to be hopeful and optimistic. But again, with the caveat that, if numbers spike again in September because of school opening or who knows what else, that may have to be pushed back. That's my 2 cents.
I'm going to agree with Richard Lloyd and Ben. Let's wait and see how the school thing goes. And Americans don't do well with holidays. We had a spike of Memorial Day. We had a spike of 4th of July. And here comes another one in 3 more weeks. So yeah, Ben, great idea. Second or third week of October for a tentative and see what happens.
What if here's what we've done. We've basically been making this decision on the 2nd Monday of the month. What if, I was just looking at the calendar, what if in September we made the decision on the 21st of September instead of our normal meeting, which would be the 14th? What that does is that gives us 2 weeks after Labor Day and 2 weeks of Irving schools being in to see what's gone on. And as our church staff, we'll start looking at October the 4th. If we decide on the 21st, that gives us 2 weeks to ramp up and implement all the plans with volunteers and everything else. So if we decide on the 21st, that's a hint, that's a pivot between the holiday and the day that we would come back if we are able to, and hopefully be able to see what the numbers are doing on that day. I think that the 14th would be a little premature, 1 week after the holiday and 1 week of school coming back. But I think if we wait till the 28th, that's going to put a lot of pressure on us to get volunteers with only a 5-day window, unless we push back till October the 11th, which would be okay too.
With a tentative open date of what?
Of October 4. We point toward October 4. We look at October 4. We plan for October 4, knowing that on the 21st, we may call timeout if numbers have spiked. And if numbers have spiked a little, it's a lot easier to say, no, we're not, than, we could say, no, we're not on Saturday. But we can't say, yeah, let's go on Saturday. We need a couple of weeks to get volunteers in place. And that would let us do that.
I'm okay with that as a target date. I also understand that target may be moving.
Yep.
As we shoot at it. One of the questions that this may be for Meg more than anything, do you have any idea what percentage of your volunteers are 65 and above?
Oh gosh, well, that's unfair to ask me a percentage question because I'm terrible at that. The majority of our volunteers, we have a lot of volunteers that are 65 and above.
That's kind of what I thought would be the answer. And I see that as being an issue because, not just being 65 and up, it's all the other factors that go in with that.
And we should just keep in mind the individual who would schedule all those volunteers for the nursery. We just furloughed, so we need to get her back rolling again for that.
You're not talking about a lot of kids coming in that first few Sundays if you go by your little chart there. I mean, we have 20 to 50% of the people show up, and how many 2-year-olds do they have? So, yeah, you got to take that into consideration too. But yes, I'm fine with, you know, if you're good at 2 weeks of setup and we decide the 21st and looking at all the data then, that sounds good to me.
But you're going to have to really look at, especially asking people to work in the children's area. You know, I guess I didn't realize that the majority of them are 65 and older. I guess that makes sense, but you're going to have to specially ask people, and you're going to need at least 2 weeks, I would think.
Yes, sir. That's why I was wanting us to at least say that we would target October 4, because by doing that, we'll start immediately trying to get volunteers for that and greeters, and you know, it affects everybody. It affects the ERT. It affects our entire church. So it gives us really 7 weeks to start recruiting and getting that plan together. And again, if on the 21st we say October 4th is too soon, that's easy. What's hard is trying to get that number of volunteers in a short period of time. So this gives us a lot of lead in time to do that.
Yeah, 2 weeks is tight, no matter what, but it does let us, you know, prepare for all that and get all those volunteers in place. So I think we have enough time between now and then.
Yep. Megan?
I will say we would also, especially with our ministry, with the nursery and preschool, for sure, Molly and I would like to see what church looks like back before we even open our area. And so if the target date was coming back on October 4th, really we would actually have more time to assess what it looks like just to function in the worship center. And then our parents are going to be tentative to be bringing their kids into the classrooms anyways. So we would have a little bit more training time, I guess, with our volunteers.
That helps.
Would we want to set up like, would we want to set up like an area for people who do bring kids if they needed to take them out of the worship service, you know, and because you got to think about that, they got to be social distanced even then and all that mess, you know. I don't know. I'm not going to have to worry about it, but you know, there will be people that have to worry about it, you know, like maybe the peacocks.
Meg, what kind of time frame are you thinking? I mean, if say October 4th, we came back live worship wise, how many weeks do you foresee? What would you and Molly like to have before you came back with kids?
I think if we watched for 3 weeks, I think that would give, the first week's going to be just a catch-all of everyone trying to work out the hiccups and all that. So I think by week 3 we'll have a good groove and a good jive. So that would give us a good, clear picture of what population is coming and what amount of kids are being brought, and a clear picture of what the need is for our area, or the demand really, with if there's a lot of young families coming and we are running out of areas for them to leave the worship center and take their kids because Ben didn't set up an area for them to go to, then yeah. But I think 3 weeks would give us a good
Another random thought, and I apologize for these random thoughts, but as they're talking, it just comes up. But you know, how many people with little kids are thinking to themselves, well, if they're not going to offer that I am not going to come, as opposed to, you know, so do we get an accurate picture for those 3 weeks? I don't know. Maybe I'm totally off on that, but I could see us, if we had a 2-year-old, saying, oh, okay, they're not going to offer, probably a little easier if we stay home and worship online. I don't know.
The one thing it does give us, though, is it does show us who is coming, and it lets us recruit live from stage to say, we need another 8 helpers in 2 weeks in our children's ministry, and you guys are obviously here. Would you consider helping us? And it's a lot easier to get volunteers on a Sunday announcing from the stage than it is sending emails out or, you know, that kind of thing. So that's a benefit.
So that's going to mean Anthony and Mary Quewington for sure.
Okay.
So
So
that's a given, Ben.
I don't want to rush it, but I don't hear anybody clamoring for us to come back in September. What I'm hearing consensus that October 4 is a point day.
Well, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that I don't think it would really make a big difference if we start in September or October. I don't think the outcome's going to be any different. The numbers aren't going to like drastically drop to really make a difference. I think the biggest difference really going to be who's really going to come, no matter what the situation is. And are the numbers of people going to remain the same, or will they start to grow because we are seeing, or other people are seeing people in church, and would they start to grow from there? I don't think it would make a difference if we start in September, October. October is really more of a date just to say, let's watch a little bit more to see what happens. Like Ben said, you know, we could see a spike, but, you know, it could go down too. But I don't think it's really going to be that big of a difference. I think what makes the difference is when we actually get started, what actually takes place from there. You're going to have those that are going to come, that 10%, if they're the ones that are saying, why aren't we back yet? And even if we started with just 10%, you're going to have people that will start saying, okay, well, maybe it's safe now. We're not hearing too much that's going on. And we see people in the audience. Wouldn't it be great to go back? And we'll start to see it grow. Whether or not that's the first 3 weeks, and if it's enough for Megan and Molly to determine things like that, who knows? But it may be different people too. There may be different families that will start to come. So again, not going off of, you know, fear, but off of faith. I think over faith, time, people will start to come back regardless. And I think the numbers they may even just stay in one place because you are going to hit that wall of people saying, yes, I'm going to come, to Ben's of the world, or I'm not going to come. It doesn't matter to me. I mean, to me, if we start in September, October, we still have to start somewhere to see what's going to take place. I think a date really is just for other people to know what we're working on. What are we working towards?
I would propose that we shoot October 4th out there as a target date for live worship, and bring whatever the first Sunday in November is for children to come back if things continue in that manner. And obviously it's, you know, Anthony just said, we don't know who's coming, and we don't know how many will come, and we don't know what consistency they'll come, and it all is up in the air because we don't know what the numbers are going to do. So it could be a factor that we'd have to visit to, is this worth it if we didn't have enough coming to live worship? I mean, that's a possibility. I hope it's not a reality, but I think it is a possibility. So that's my proposal. I'll make a motion of it, whatever you want to do, but.
Well, here's what we'll do. We'll go down that path. I mean, we could all vote on it. I think everybody would agree with that. Here's what I do know. When we come back, We're going to minister to everybody who shows up to the very best of our ability with the gospel of Jesus Christ. And we're going to minister to every child and middle school and high schooler and every senior. And we're going to minister to everybody who feels uncomfortable and doesn't show up and worships with us online. We're still going to do our best to be the body of Christ to everybody, whether they are physically there or not. And that's something that I think we can be excited about. Okay, here's something else we could be excited about. So Molly and Megan have come up with a plan that they're calling the virtual learning at Christ Church. And I sent this to you earlier, so I'm not going to necessarily go through it line by line. What it basically does is says, we have a church building, we have good Wi-Fi, we have the ability to spread people out. Would you guys be comfortable if over the next few weeks, we brought in 2 or 3 families with children? And we brought those kids in and we asked volunteers to consider coming and helping those kids with their online learning. It wouldn't be an all-day thing. It's not a daycare. It's augmenting the parents who maybe struggle with language, or maybe they struggle with just not having good internet connection at their house. There are some at-risk kids, and they're at risk because their family's just not set up to do an at-home online kind of learning like many of us could do with our kids. And so they'd like to at least explore using basically one family in a big classroom and letting all those kids come, 2, 3, 4 kids. And they may be a first grader, third grader, and fifth grader, or a third, fifth, and seventh grader. And get them in the room with good Wi-Fi, with good air conditioning, with a good learning ability, and someone who can help them in their online studies. And it may not last, it wouldn't likely last the entire school year, but it would get them off, it would let them start in a really good kind of online learning model. Again, if we can't find the volunteers, fine, we don't do it, but we think that we can. The school district will provide the technology, so we don't have to provide computers or tablets or however they learn, and they will provide the breakfast and lunch. And then we would provide the Wi-Fi, the water, restrooms, lights, the stuff that we have. We'd clean it up. We'd take their temperature. If we needed to provide Lunchables or other things, then we would do that. And we would follow the safety protocols just like we're going to. So we're not talking about 10 families. We're talking about starting small with 2 or 3. If it goes really well and we increase that to 4 or 5 over the next 6 weeks, then that would be fine too. We're basically just using our building to provide an area where these kids can come and learn. And they would like your blessing to be able to at least try that, particularly for at-risk kids. Megan, is there anything you would add to that, or did I cover that well enough?
I think you did a great job covering that.
I would definitely not oppose that. I mean, I think that the biggest thing is the environment. I know the schools are taking care of them, IT wise, and from what I understood, they also were going to do internet service too, of some way. But I think the environment at the church is a huge thing. If it gets them out of the house where there may be too many distractions, if we can offer something like that, I would definitely say go for that.
I'm certainly a go for that.
I also agree.
Before.
Great idea, Megan.
I could not take credit for that idea.
Great idea, whoever.
That is Molly's heart shining through right there.